a podcast dedicated to being a voice for wild horses. My name is Chase McGoran, and I'll be your host. Let's save these horses together. All I ask you to do is listen. Over 55 million years ago, the first known equids appeared on the North American continent. These dog-sized, four-toed forest dwellers were known as Eohippus. Around 20 million years ago, these creatures spread out over the grasslands and evolved into single-hoofed grazing animals that resemble today's modern horses. Scientists theorize that around 10,000 years ago, horses migrated across the Bering Strait into Eurasia and became extinct on the North American continent. Indigenous knowledge keepers maintain this isn't true and that horses have always been here. In the 15th century, horses were reintroduced by the Spanish colonists, and according to Dr. Claudia Notsky, world-renowned wild horse expert, they immediately filled an ecological need that had been left vacant due to their absence. North America is home to the horse. It's where they evolved over millions of years and where they continue to survive and thrive if just left alone. Wild horses are remarkably adaptable, able to survive in the harshest of environments, and in the process, they're helping other species as well. Today, we're going to talk about the incredible resilience of wild horses. From digging wells in the barren sands of Sable Island to surviving the unforgiving winters in the foothills of Alberta's Rocky Mountains. Her career has taken her all over the world, where she's had the privilege of spending time with and photographing wild horses. She has taken pictures of the Kaimanawa wild horses of New Zealand, Gorano wild horses of Portugal, and the wild Przewalski horses of Mongolia. Her photos have graced the cover of the Canadian Geographic magazine on several occasions, and some even adorn the walls of private collectors who have been moved by her wild horse photography. Sandy also worked for 25 years as a radio announcer, and now uses her skills to host tourists from around the world, including the UK, Australia, and the US, helping them experience the thrill of Alberta mountain horses in their natural habitat.
Thank you so much for joining us again here, Sandy. Can you tell us how you first became involved with wild horses?
It was an accident, actually. It was many years ago. I won't say how many, but I had no idea that wild horses existed. I just knew that I loved horses growing up. And one day I decided that I was going to participate in a trip that was in Alberta. And basically the trip was all about being a cowboy. So you would be assigned a horse and you would ride through the Rocky Mountain foothills and live like, cowboys, having, beans over a fire every night. So I live in Ontario. I flew out to Alberta and I was young. I think I was 20 years old. And then when I got there, I was assigned this beautiful big draft kind of horse. His name was Jim. And there was about 8 other people on the trail ride, and we had 2 guides. And off we went into the mountains. And within a few minutes, I was in excruciating pain. I didn't know why. And I tried to not complain too much about it, but finally I couldn't do it any longer. And I had to call out to the guide and say, I can't ride. I have no idea why. My hips are on fire. So it was really sad that I couldn't do this. They tried to offer me a skinnier horse because Jim was kind of a chubby horse, and neither one worked. So they gave me the option to either just go back to Banff and then back to Calgary and back home, or to just hang out at the campsite, and everyone else would go off every morning on their horses and spend the day away from the campsite, but I would just stay there. And I decided on that option because it was so beautiful. So Jim and I would just hang out every day. I had him on a big long rope, and we just went for walks, and it was actually pretty beautiful. It was quiet. And one afternoon I was lying in an alpine meadow, and it was a beautiful day, and I was just looking at the puffy clouds. Jim was munching on grass beside me, and all of a sudden the earth shook. I had no idea what was going on. I jumped up. I thought it was an earthquake. And it was a herd of wild horses running by me.
Wow.
And it was a moment that did change my life. I had no idea wild horses existed. Of course, I was the only one who saw them, because everyone else was gone. And I was excitedly telling them about them when they got back, and they had never seen them. And for the rest of the trip, never did either. So that made me really realize that I was given a gift that day, because a few days earlier, I received the devastating news that I couldn't ride. Later, when I got home, I was diagnosed with that hip dysplasia. And so that was going to be something that I was going to deal with for the rest of my life, that I was never going to be able to ride. So turning lemons into lemonade, my focus with horses was never going to be, from that moment on, about domestic horses and riding. It was going to be about wild horses. And so they have been my passion and my purpose pretty much ever since.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like it was meant to happen, right? You couldn't go riding and you stayed back and you were the only person that got to see a whole herd go by. So,
Yeah, and it really helped to shape my future and to have a relationship with horses, which is that horses never have to ever do anything for me except exist. So
yeah.
I kind of love that.
That's incredible. Today, we are going to be talking about the Sable Island horses, another Canadian species of wild horse, as well as Alberta's mountain horse. Can you tell me, how did you first become involved with the Sable Island horses?
Well, like so many little girls and boys, I grew up in an era where there were a lot of books about Sable Island. They used to call them more ponies, Sable Island ponies at that time. And I was given Sable Island pony books when I was a kid, and I always dreamt about going there. I knew about the island. I needed to go at one point, but certainly didn't know how I was ever going to do that, because it was, remote in the Atlantic Ocean, didn't have visitation from members of the public other than, a year's worth of working with the federal government to convince them to get on there. But you'd be a scientist, researcher, or someone of that field. So it was always a dream. And then thankfully in 2013, Sable Island became a national park reserve. The federal government gave it that designation. And as part of their mandate, they did have to allow visitation from the members of the public. And it's been very restricted. Very few people do go every year because of the remoteness of this island. But my dream came true in 2014, and I was on Sable Island for the first time. And since then, I've been on Sable Island, I think 37 times.
Wow.
Because I do actually work as a guide now, bringing people to Sable Island with a beautiful company called Katuk Expeditions. But that's how it all started. It started as a dream. And, when you're a kid, you have a dream and you never let go of it. You're eventually going to have it come to fruition.
That's such a good story. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of the Sable Island horses? Where is Sable Island? How did the horses get there? That kind of stuff.
Sure. So Sable Island is approximately 300 kilometers from Halifax, Nova Scotia, and it is in the Atlantic Ocean. It's a sandbar. It's 42 kilometers long and 2.1 kilometers wide. So how did the horses get there? There are many theories, but the one that is the most widely accepted is that in the late 1700s, when there was so many shipwrecks off of Sable Island. The reason being that the explorers coming from Europe, obviously they didn't have the navigation systems that we have today, and all of a sudden, boom, kaboom! There's this island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Where the heck did this come from? So ships were perishing off the shores of Sable Island. People were dying, and so there was the requirement for a life-saving station to be built. And a Boston merchant named Thomas Hancock, he decided that was going to be one of his things he was going to do. And he collected horses, and it's not the most pleasant thing to talk about, but at that time there was also the terrible expulsion of the Acadian people. So the word is that Thomas Hancock collected a lot of stolen Acadian horses and brought them to the island. One of the reasons being to help build this life-saving station.
Mhm.
So over time, the horses were abandoned and left behind and not cared for, and they became, very much the ultimate survivor in equine form on this island, and completely able to overcome any of the pressures that were facing them, including climate and storms and hurricanes and all these things. And they really show the resilience of wild horses.
Do these horses have any unique characteristics?
The Sable Island wild horses,
Yes.
yes. Um, Over time, they have become a species unto themselves. And this is something that is a result of Mother Nature and the environment and the things that they have to build up to overcome adversity. So the Sable Island wild horse is very adept at um, digging, through sand for water and things like that. They have shorter ears than a lot of other horses. They average about 13 hands. Their manes are extremely long. Some of the longest manes in wild horse populations around the world belong to Sable Island wild horses. And while the manes are certainly beautiful and photographers love them and artists love the manes, they're actually there for a reason, to be that lengthy and that thick, to provide protection for the horses. And they're stocky. The horses are stocky. They're built tough. On Sable Island, the horses are predominantly bay, but there are also Palomino and blacks. There are no grays. There are no pintos. I have seen some Palominos, but predominantly they are bay.
And you said the mane offers protection. Would that just be against like bugs and the elements, stuff like that?
Exactly. The horses, there are no trees on Sable Island, so I often get people asking me, how do they protect themselves and shelter against a storm? The island is 100% sand, and it's covered in a marram grass. It's a broad-leafed grass that is the main source of forage for the horses. But another thing that defines Sable Island is the tall sand dunes. And so the horses just naturally, instinctively will shelter against the dunes during a storm, and they're quite protected that way.
That's awesome. I understand that, like the Alberta mountain horse, these horses on Sable Island were once classified as feral. Can you tell us how that changed, what their current classification is, and how it protects them?
So yes, before the federal government gave the designation of National Park Reserve to Sable Island, when they were in the process of doing that, they kind of had to figure out what to do about the horses, because in national parks throughout the country, there are obviously several species of wildlife, but they are wildlife. And so the federal government wasn't quite sure what to do with the horses in terms of a designation that would be under the mandate of Parks Canada, because it was quite an exception. Now, in 1961, the horses were given protection federally by Prime Minister John Diefenbaker at the time, and that was I think it was under the file of the Shipping Act or something like that. It was under kind of a weird designation. So when Parks Canada, the federal government, took over, they polled people across the country. They put out a massive survey, which was really quite a wonderful thing to do, because they needed to get the opinion of people across the country about a number of things about Sable Island moving forward as a national park, but also about the horses. And people were overwhelmingly responsive about the particular topic of the horses, as opposed to any other topic about Sable Island. And they're absolute 100% resolved to make sure that these horses were continuing to be protected and would somehow fit into the mandate for a national park. So Parks Canada gave them the designation of naturalized species, which I think is just absolutely fantastic. It's an acknowledgement of the fact that these horses have survived on the island since the late 1700s. It's an acknowledgement that they are a species unto themselves, created over time by forces of nature and Mother Nature's good and bad in terms of storms, and also the fact that the winters on Sable Island are not actually as bad as people probably think they are, and all of those things. So they are the ultimate survivors, coupled with the fact that the Canadian passion for these horses is so huge. They came up with this designated term of naturalized species. So moving forward, the horses are never going to be touched. They're never going to be harmed. They haven't been for hundreds of years. I shouldn't say that hundreds of years. They've been on the island for hundreds of years, but there has been time, over that course where people had been trying to profit from the horses or send them to slaughter. It's quite a storied history of those horses. But moving forward, they will always have that protection where people are second when they arrive on Sable Island. They are second, a far distant number two to the horses. So it's just a really beautiful designation and very deserving. And we do, as wild horse advocates, hope that the Alberta mountain horses one day receive that kind of protection, because there are similar circumstances with the Alberta mountain horse in terms of their survivability, their resilience against weather, the fact that they are too a very, very specific species, Alberta mountain horses. There are no other horses in the world like these horses, and they are deserving of the designation of naturalized species as well. The challenge there, though, is that they are under the file of the Alberta government, the provincial government, as opposed to the federal government. So the work still needs to be done to convince the Alberta government to give them that designation.
And if there's one thing we know about Canadians, it's that we love our horses, and we will do anything to see them get that designation. My next question, I think you kind of already answered it, but maybe this will give you an opportunity to kind of add on a little. Do wild Alberta mountain horses also meet the criteria for a naturalized species?
Yes. The answer is a resounding yes, for the reasons I just mentioned. And one of the things that comes along with the moniker of naturalized species is a degree of protection, which the Alberta mountain horses do not have in any way, shape, or form right now. I love the fact that your podcast is called The Wildy West, because in many ways, the attitudes towards wild horses are sort of the Wild West. They still are very much in a very precarious position regarding the relationship that they have with mankind. And in Alberta, there has been a lot of talk from the Alberta Premier and the Minister of Forestry and Parks, Todd Loewen, about reducing the numbers of Alberta mountain horses and facilitating contraception program with the mares. None of this is based in any science, and it's completely in deference to a number of industries that have the ear of Todd Loewen, including the hunting industry, other extractive industries that just do not want the wild horses there. Now, the thing that exists pretty much everywhere when there's a struggle to save wild horses is that small special interest groups tend to have the ear of government, whereas the overwhelming population wants these wild horses to be left alone and to be enjoyed as part of humanity, compassion, as part of enjoying outdoor spaces and wilderness with your families, hiking, photography, art, movies. All of those things are so often rooted in the beauty of nature. So these are parts of humanity that are completely overlooked when the smaller groups, the revenue generating groups that profit from public lands, have the ear of government.
Yeah, it seems like whoever has the money is the one that they're going to listen to, which is super unfortunate, but
it's a cliche and we hear it all the time, but it rings so true. Follow the money.
Yeah, always. So if all we need is millions of dollars, and we'll be able to save the horses easily, right?
Well, that you mentioned that, one of the things that is completely 100% disregarded by the Alberta government is that, okay, if we want to talk to them in terms that they understand and will listen to, let's talk about money.
Mhm.
So when we talk about money, we can, on the side of the pro wild mountain horse people, which obviously you and I are of, and so many thousands are as well, the amount of money that comes into the Alberta government from um, the people that travel to Alberta to see these horses.
Mhm.
As much as the Alberta government will never market them, well, market is a terrible word, promote them as something that you can enjoy, that's unique, as beautiful and as magnificent as going to Banff or Lake Louise. These horses are actually loved around the world. And I myself have enjoyed for many years bringing people out into the wild of the Alberta Rocky Mountain foothills and SUVs and driving them to see these horses. I've had guests come from as far away as Australia, the UK, all over the United States, certainly, and of course across Canada. So
Mhm.
when they arrive, they are flying to Calgary. They're renting vehicles. They're staying in hotels. They're going into restaurants. It's an industry unto itself that I feel that we need to start talking about it. I mean, I don't like to have the topic be about money when I'm talking about Alberta mountain horses. They are priceless and they offer us so much
Mhm.
just being with them. But because the Alberta government insists on having everything be follow the money and money based, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the revenue that these horses actually bring to the Alberta government. And if they flip the script and actually started to put the Alberta mountain horses in their brochures and their promotions that they will do to increase tourism and get people from across the world to come to Alberta, it can only get even bigger. And just position these horses in such a way that they're not there in terms of a nuisance in any way, shape, or form. They are there as a species that has existed for hundreds of years, woven into the fabric of the landscape, a big part of the biodiversity of the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, in tandem with the predators and all other wild animals that live in these beautiful wilderness areas, including deer, elk, wolves, grizzlies, black bears, coyotes, foxes. It goes on and on. These horses are integrated completely into that biodiversity.
Mhm.
So, there's so many ways that the government can look at this instead of, consistently insisting on putting their blinders and repeating the narrative that the industries that profit from public lands will give to them, and then they will pass that along to the public.
Going off of what you said, Alberta is actually known for, well, maybe not known, but there have been many Hollywood film crews that have come through here. And I feel like they don't even know about the wild horses, because if we had those large herds, we would attract film crews because of the beauty of the landscape on top of seeing a herd of wild horses running through it. It's really something that you can't explain, and you have to see for yourself to understand how magical and beautiful it is. And if that was more common, if the Alberta government was advertising it, there would be so many more people coming here every single year just for the horses, which again drives up all those businesses and all that revenue. So money shouldn't be something we have to talk about, but there's definitely a market.
Isn't it kind of, the ultimate in irony that the Alberta mountain horse to people around the world is this magical, mythical animal that they want to come and see, yet in their own backyard, when I think about in terms of the Alberta government, what they have in their own backyard, they consider to be a nuisance. They consider them to be something that needs to be reduced in numbers. I can tell you right now, the number of films, documentaries that are either in the works or yet to start, but are already being planned or have been completed. Um, I have participated in a couple myself that aren't ready yet. They're not ready for the public view yet, so they're in final stages of editing, etc. There is one that was done by BBC this summer, and it is to be released in December, and it may even have been released by now. It is currently going to be played in only the UK because it's a BBC documentary. But eventually it will be available to us in Canada and North America, and I'm sure around the world via streaming. But I was in an area of the Alberta wilderness, in a wild horse area, in September, and I encountered a BBC film guide, and I had already corresponded, as it turned out, with the director of this documentary a couple of months earlier, and they had decided to come and just camp out and kind of, I think they wanted to do it on their own terms, and they wanted to do it sort of semi-secretly, because that way they weren't going to spend a lot of their time throughout the day discussing with very enthusiastic wild horse photographers and advocates situations. I think they wanted to spend a lot of the time just focusing on the beauty of these animals up against some of the most magnificent landscape in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I did receive a message from one of the friends that I have in the UK that they caught wind that this was going to be showing in the UK very soon. So that's just one example, but I've spoken to many people, as have a lot of the other advocates that I know, including, of course, Daryl Glover of Help Alberta Wildlife Society. He is constantly being asked to participate in documentaries. And these documentaries are from filmmakers around the world. Oh, there's another one I'm forgetting that actually came out this summer, and it was made by a German crew. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, I can't say that. It's in German. And so I don't speak German. I don't understand German. So I did see a few minutes of it, but honestly, what we need to do is get them to put some translated captions on it so that we can understand it. But I mean, it was all about the beauty of these animals. So, there's all this interest from around the world, but no interest from the Alberta government.
Yeah, from the actual government that manages them, right? I guess that'll kind of lead us into our next question pretty nicely. What obstacles are the Alberta mountain horses facing in being reclassified as a naturalized species?
Well, until the Alberta government actually acknowledges their right to exist, they're never going to give them that classification, because, well, along with the classification comes protection. So the goal is to have the Alberta government acknowledge these animals' right to exist and left alone. In Alberta, there is a very, very, very prolific and somewhat perfect predator-prey balance with the wild horses. So I am a wild horse advocate, and I do travel around the world, and I make it my passion and my purpose to know a lot about wild horses in other areas as well. And when you look at the American Mustangs in the American West, most of the areas that the American Mustangs live on public lands have been completely wiped clean of predators. And that is due to the public lands ranchers that do not want the wolves and the bears and the mountain lions to go after their livestock. So in the Rocky Mountain foothills of Alberta, there are many predators that take the foals and the weak and the elder and the injured. Do we want to think about that as lovers of Alberta mountain horses? No, we don't. But we also know that as wild animals, this is the way that nature works. Mm-hmm. So the Alberta mountain horse numbers have been pretty static for as long as they've been actually tracking the numbers. They hover between usually about 1,500 and 1,700 horses. And they stay that way around those numbers year after year after year because of the predator-prey balance. So it makes no sense to reduce their numbers. These animals are on over 2 million acres of public lands in the Rocky Mountain foothills in the wilderness. And so the people that want them gone, again, are the ones that profit from public lands in some way. And so until the government actually acknowledges the truth, acknowledges the science, acknowledges the ridiculously low number of Alberta mountain horses on public lands, they are never going to give them the designation of naturalized species. So that, I think the designation of naturalized species is kind of a plan, a next step, a second step. Because if we as advocates tried to get the Alberta government to give them that designation, without them actually acknowledging their right to exist, I don't know that would ever happen. So I think the first thing they need to do is acknowledge their right to exist, and their right to exist without intervention from mankind. Then get, hopefully, the designation of naturalized species and the protection they deserve.
I understand that the Sable Island horses have survived for hundreds of years, enduring brutal environmental conditions. Can you tell us about some of the challenges to survival that these horses face?
Sure. They because it is a island that is finite in size, they have to rely on the resources that are available to them. But on Sable Island, in the western end of the island, there are a number of freshwater ponds that the horses are fortunate to have. On the eastern side of the island, it's very interesting, and I experienced it for the first time this summer, because when we take people to Sable Island by helicopter or fixed wing plane, we land at Main Station, which is in the west, and we hike around the west. But this summer, I was able to get on a sailboat, which took us to the east end of the island for the first time. Now, on the east end of the island, there are no freshwater ponds. So I had always known that the eastern spit wild horses of Sable Island dig for water. And this time I actually got to observe it, and it was just so cool. I watched a family band. I think there were 5. There was a stallion, a couple of yearlings, and a couple of mares. And there was the lead mare, who is the boss. She started to dig for water, and she hit water, and I watched her head disappear into the sand. Like, you couldn't even see, like, all you could see were 4 legs and a body. That's how deep she went, and she was drinking away, and then because she's the boss. A lot of people think the stallion is the boss, but the lead mare is the boss. So she drank, and then the stallion came over and he drank, and then the yearlings came and they drank, and there's always a hierarchy with water. So that's one of the challenges that they obviously face, but they've overcome it. I have seen the wild horses of Sable Island also drink the salt water. I'm assuming that would create health concerns after a while if that's all they had. But they do certainly enjoy it. Maybe it's because they like salt as well, and the minerals. So in the winters, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that the winters are not actually that bad on Sable Island due to the temperate currents from the south. And the average temperature on Sable Island in the winter hovers around 0, 1, 2 degrees. They do get snow, and if the snow does accumulate, it doesn't last very long. So the thing that is challenging for the horses in the winter, though, is that the marram grass, which is a brilliant green throughout the summer, and in the winter, it's obviously still there, but they have to dig for it. Or if there is snow, they dig for it. Most of the challenge with that grass in the winter, though, is that it loses its nutrients. It's just the cycle of a plant, so it's in more dormant phase in the winter. It turns more of a gold or beige, whitish color, and the horses are going to eat it, and they still eat it, but they have to eat a lot more to get the nutrients from the grass than they would in the summer when the plant is flourishing and it's in its most nutritious, that's a hard word to say, cycle. So that takes care of their food and their water. There are also parasites that can harm the horses over time. Overall, it's whatever Mother Nature wants to throw at them. So there are hurricanes that can develop usually late in fall, and they have those horses have been subject to a number of hurricanes over the years. Since I've been going in 2014, there have been a number of hurricanes that have either been, direct hit or off to the side. And the concern that people have for the horses is so huge. Everyone who knows anything about the horses or goes to Sable or is involved in the visitations from members of the public to see Sable Island, we get a lot of people emailing us with questions like, are the horses going to be okay? Are the horses okay? And we're always happy to pass along that these horses know how to shelter. They know what to do. They survived the hurricanes. The hurricanes are actually less of a challenge to these horses than a winter that could be, maybe deemed a harsh winter. And certainly the people that are on Sable Island as well, they often will have to abandon the island during a hurricane. But there is a woman who is the most amazing human being regarding resilience and tenacity and living on Sable Island. Her name is Zoe Lucas, and no one knows more about that island or those horses than she does. She's lived off and on the island for over 40 years. And there was a hurricane. I wish I could remember the name because there's so many names every year. That took place about 3 years ago, maybe 4. And Zoe Lucas said, no, she was staying. She was hunkering down in her house. There's a little bit of building, a few buildings on Sable Island for the Parks Canada staff. And so Lucas has a very vintage house on Sable Island, and she stayed. And so some of the panels of her house roof things flew off during the night. But we were all holding our breath for her safety, but also to get the word about what happened with the wild horses, because that hurricane hit at night. It had greatly diminished by morning, and she put out a statement about the horses where she came out of her house and the horses were just grazing away like absolutely nothing had happened. They were just like, hi, good morning, what's up? Nothing new, nothing to see around here. Anything new? Nope.
It really says something to their resilience. That's something that scares all of us as humans. They're just like, yeah, it's just another Tuesday, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, part 1 of this season's first interview with Sandy Sharkey. The amount of support we have received from you has really meant a lot, and it brings us one step closer to seeing these incredible animals saved. A huge thank you to Sandy and everyone that took time out of their busy schedules to sit down for an interview this season. If you want to help, there are a ton of different things you can do. If you live in Canada, you can write to your local member of parliament or directly to the Minister of Parks in Alberta. If you aren't as comfortable doing that, or you don't live in Canada, you may want to follow the Help Alberta Wildie Society or HAWS on Facebook to get more involved and see what other things you can do. If that's not enough, there's also the Alberta Mountain Horse Preservation Society on Facebook that you might also want to go check out, see what they're doing to help. Information for both of these groups can be found in the show notes for this episode. And if you haven't already, I highly recommend going and giving them a follow. And, of course, every like and comment on the podcast means so much to us. And clicking subscribe on YouTube will do even more to help us out. Every little bit truly does help. And not only does it allow me to show tangible proof that people care, but it genuinely helps us keep making these episodes. Keep in mind, we're a small team and we put a lot of work into making these episodes happen. If you would be so kind as to share this with friends or family that you think might be interested in this topic or who you think would want to help, I would really appreciate it. If you want to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Blue Sky using the tag @TheWildieWest, or just search The Wildie West. You'll find us. For any business inquiries, please contact us at thewildiewest@gmail.com. I'm your host, Chase McGoran. Thank you once again for listening to The Wildie West.